Have you ever wondered how a man born to a modest family in Austria could rise to become the dictator of Germany and instigator of World War II? Adolf Hitler, a name that would later shake the world, was born in the small town of Braunau am Inn in Austria on the 20th of April 1889. His father, Alois Hitler, was a stern and volatile man, quick to anger, while his mother, Clara Hitler, was a gentle soul, nurturing and kind. Young Adolf's early life was marked by tension and conflict, particularly with his father, who had no understanding or sympathy for his son's artistic dreams. The young boy was drawn to the world of art, a world his father scornfully dismissed as impractical and frivolous. The discord between father and son created a friction that shaped the early years of Hitler's life. The early years of Hitler's life were not indicative of the infamous figure he would become. In his youth, Hitler aspired to become an artist, a dream that eventually led him to Vienna. After the death of his parents when he was 18, which saddened him, Hitler then set his sights on the Austrian capital, a city sparkling with culture and artistic opportunities. His dream was to gain admission into the prestigious Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, but fate had a cruel twist in store. Despite his fervent passion and dedication, Hitler found himself rejected from the academy not once but twice. The reasons for his rejection were unclear. Some cited his inability to paint human figures, while others suggested a lack of academic credentials. The aspiring artist was left feeling desolate and humiliated, his dreams seemingly crushed under the weight of these setbacks. Yet it was during this period of struggle and hardship that Hitler's resolve began to harden. Living in poverty, he found shelter wherever he could, often in homeless shelters or cheap boarding houses. He roamed the streets of Vienna, selling his artwork to make ends meet. But the city was a harsh mistress. It was a life marked by desperation and survival, far removed from the grandeur and sophistication that Vienna was known for. During these challenging years, Hitler became intimately acquainted with the harsh realities of life. He witnessed firsthand the divide between the affluent and the impoverished, the privileged and the marginalized. During that period, the idea of anti-Semitism was prevalent in Vienna, which had a significant impact on Hitler's view of the Jews. These experiences would leave a lasting impact, shaping his ideologies and beliefs. Hitler began to develop a deep-seated resentment towards the city's Jewish population, a sentiment that would later fuel his political agenda. This period of struggle was, in many ways, a defining chapter in Hitler's life. It was a crucible that tested his resilience and determination, molding him into the man he would eventually become. Through the lens of history, we can see how these experiences, as harsh and challenging as they were, played a pivotal role in Hitler's rise to power. In 1913, seeking to evade the Austrian draft, Hitler made a move that would significantly shape his future. He relocated to Munich, a city that he had come to love during his visits as a struggling artist. Munich, with its vibrant culture and strong German nationalist sentiment, would later serve as the springboard for Hitler's political career. In 1914, World War I broke out, and Hitler, like many young men of his time, enlisted in the German army. He saw it as an opportunity to serve his beloved fatherland and perhaps find purpose in the chaos. The battlefield, however, was unlike anything he could have imagined. Despite the horrors of war, Hitler demonstrated rare bravery, earning the Iron Cross, First Class, a decoration seldom awarded to foot soldiers. Yet the tide of war was not in Germany's favor. The defeat was crushing, both in terms of morale and the nation's standing in the world. The once mighty Germany was now a country on its knees, subjected to humiliating terms in the Treaty of Versailles. The Kaiser, Wilhelm II, abdicated, leaving a power vacuum and a nation in turmoil. Germany was thrust into economic chaos. The mark, once a symbol of German prosperity, was now practically worthless. Breadlines became a common sight, and the spectre of starvation loomed large. This was the era of the Weimar Republic, a democratic government that struggled to hold the nation together amidst overwhelming odds. This was the world that Hitler returned to, a world vastly different from the one he had left behind. He was disillusioned, like many of his countrymen, with what he perceived as the incompetence and weakness of the Weimar Republic. He viewed the defeat and the subsequent peace terms as a betrayal, a stab in the back by the politicians back home. His resentment grew, fueled by the economic hardships and the perceived humiliation of the German people. He blamed the Republic, the Communists and the Jews for Germany's downfall. Hitler, once a simple soldier, was now a man with a mission: to restore Germany to its former glory, no matter the cost. The seeds of Hitler's rise to power were sown amidst the chaos and disillusionment of post-war Germany. In the early 1920s, Hitler found his political voice in the form of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party. This was a time of political turbulence in Germany, with many factions vying for power in the aftermath of the First World War. The Nazi Party was just one of many, but it was here that Hitler would find his calling. Hitler's involvement in the party began rather modestly. Initially, he was employed as a party orator, delivering speeches at public meetings. But it wasn't long before his charisma and fiery rhetoric began to attract attention. His speeches, filled with nationalistic fervor, anti-Semitic vitriol, and a disdain for the Treaty of Versailles, resonated with many disenchanted Germans. Hitler's oratory skills were not his only asset. He was also a shrewd political operator. Recognizing the need for a more unified and organized party, Hitler set about restructuring the Nazi Party, consolidating power and positioning himself at its apex. In 1923, Hitler and the Nazi Party attempted to seize power in what is now known as the Beer Hall Putsch. This attempted coup was a failure, resulting in Hitler's arrest and the temporary disbanding of the Nazi Party. But, as it so often happens in history, what seemed like a setback would turn out to be an opportunity. Hitler's trial for treason gave him a national platform from which to espouse his views. His impassioned speeches delivered from the defendant's box were widely reported in the press, further increasing his visibility and influence. Hitler was sentenced to 5 years in Landsberg prison, but he would serve only 9 months. While in prison, Hitler penned Mein Kampf, a manifesto outlining his political ideology and future plans for Germany. This time in confinement allowed Hitler to refine and articulate his extremist views, which would form the ideological foundation of the Nazi Party. Hitler's time in prison would prove to be a pivotal moment in his rise to power. Upon his release from prison, Hitler was more determined than ever to seize power in Germany. Fueled by his time in prison, he set about reorganizing the Nazi Party, adopting the swastika as its emblem and the raised arm salute as its greeting. Hitler's charisma was not to be underestimated. He began to attract a devoted following, drawing in those who felt marginalized or disillusioned by the economic woes of the time. The early 1930s brought with them a series of economic crises. The Wall Street crash of 1929 had triggered the Great Depression, and its effects were felt worldwide. Germany, still reeling from the aftermath of World War I, was hit particularly hard. Unemployment soared, savings were wiped out, and many Germans found themselves living in poverty. The public's discontent grew, and Hitler saw in it an opportunity. He capitalized on this discontent, using it to fuel his rise to power. He promised to restore Germany's former glory, to rebuild its economy and to bring back jobs. Hitler's speeches were filled with fiery rhetoric and grand promises, and many Germans desperate for change were swayed. But Hitler knew that speeches alone would not be enough to secure his rise to power. He needed allies, and so he began to form strategic alliances with other right-wing parties. These alliances would prove crucial in his ascent to power. In 1933, Hitler's efforts paid off. President Hindenburg, under pressure from advisors and other right-wing leaders, reluctantly appointed Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. It was a position of considerable power, and Hitler wasted no time in consolidating it. In the months that followed, he passed a series of laws that effectively dismantled Germany's democratic institutions. The Enabling Act, passed in March of 1933, gave Hitler the power to pass laws without the approval of the Reichstag, Germany's parliament. This was followed by the Night of the Long Knives, a purge that eliminated many of Hitler's political rivals. In 1934, President Hindenburg died, and Hitler took advantage of this to declare himself as the leader of Germany. Hitler had transformed Germany into a totalitarian state. The Reichstag fire decree and the enabling act had effectively dismantled democracy. The Night of the Long Knives had silenced his political opponents. The Nazi Party was now the only legal political party in Germany, and Hitler stood at its helm, unchallenged and in complete control. Yet this was only the beginning. Hitler's ambitions extended far beyond the borders of Germany. His eyes were set on Europe and beyond. His policies of aggressive expansion and racial purity would plunge the world into a war unlike any it had ever seen. By the mid-1930s, Hitler had transformed Germany into a totalitarian state, setting the stage for World War II. The story doesn't just end here. If you want a second part or a story about another topic, leave a comment. I would like to thank you for watching. Bye.